Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a Great League team that I've had really nice results with over the past few days, including climbing to a season-high ELO. This team is built around Shadow Annihilape. Everyone knows Shadow Annihilape is not a Pokemon to be messed with, but it really seems like the leaderboard ELO range was disrespecting it. There were a lot of teams ABA or even AAA weak to Annihilape, so I brought out the Shadow Annihilape, and my goodness, it definitely did not disappoint. For the rest of the team, I ran Dedenne on the lead and Acid Credilli as the safe switch. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and let's go Shadow Annihilape. Hopping into game number 1, picking up a pretty nice lead, Dedenne into Shadow Primeape. Now Dedenne, it's not a Pokemon that I've particularly enjoyed using this season, as it does feel very feast or famine. It has incredibly strong neutral matchups, but anytime it's in a negative matchup, it doesn't really have any counterplay. But it almost feels like a bit of a necessary evil, as it forms a really nice core pairing with the Shadow Annihilape. Now, I'm always going to be able to win switch here, just going straight Parabolic Charge because of how frail the Shadow Primeape is. The only thing I will have to watch for is a potential catch. So I'm actually not going to undertap, and instead I'm just going to look to overfarm. Opponent is going to save switch into a Fortress. Now this is actually a pretty nice spot to be in. First off, the opponent is ABA weak to Annihilape, and on top of that, I can bank a Parabolic Charge for later, and then go for an incredibly aggressive counter down with the Shadow Annihilape. They go for the Sand Tomb, that's never going to do much. Annihilape gets a full counter farm down, and apparently they were triple weak to Annihilape, as they just immediately resign the match. Great lead in the next match, Dedenne into Shadow Drifblim, and the Drifblim is not switching out. So it appears this opponent is running a team that is ABA weak to Dedenne. Even though this is a type positive matchup, these Shadow Astonishes are absolutely destroying Dedenne's health bar. The good news is I will get to buff up my defense more and more with these Parabolic Charges. Opponent is going to save switch into Diggersby. I'm able to hold on to my energy and send in Shadow Annihilape. To me, Diggersby is the safest Pokemon in this meta by far. It is playing to almost everything. And that's why having something like Shadow Annihilape can be so nice, as Annihilape has a completely dominating matchup. Shadow Annihilape will go for the Ice Punch, picking up the knockout. The nice thing here is I do survive an Astonish, which means I will get a Rage Fist. Great counting by my opponent. They knew I was getting to the Rage Fist, so they're actually going to end up firing off the Icy Wind. But I want to try and get shields down if possible, so I commit the shield, I fire off the Rage Fist, they're going to let that through, and in the back they have Lapras. So now we see why my opponent had to stay in, because they had the Drifblim Lapras core. Those two do cover each other's weaknesses pretty well, but unfortunately, when Dedenne's around, Dedenne is a massive core breaker. I'm able to tank the super effective Ice Beam and return fire with the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb is going to be shielded, and I can just stay in to force my opponent to throw energy. They're going to throw energy, and now I can close out the game with Dedenne. Dedenne has so much stored energy here. Even if one Parabolic Charge does not knock out, I'm going to make a second. So I go for the Parabolic Charge. Lapras actually tanks it. Lapras is such a beast, tanking that super effective Parabolic Charge. But we have an entire second Parabolic Charge locked and loaded to take the win. We move to the next match, and it's a dominant lead win, Dedenne into Furret. Furret has a very bad matchup into Dedenne. Obviously, they have an ability to buff up their attack with Trailblaze, but Dedenne, by buffing up its defense, means that the opponent is not getting any extra damage here. And on top of that, this entire team actually does very well into Furret, and considering Furret usage has increased a ton on the leaderboard ELO during this past week, having a team where Furret has nowhere to run really feels like I'm at a team comp advantage anytime I see one. They are going to stay in and play out this matchup though, so I'm just going to throw 5 and then go for the Parabolic Charge on the CMP tie. Opponent catches onto a Diggersby, and these are the teams that I'm talking about. Just ABA normal. What do they do if they see a Shadow Annihilape lead? You can't stay in with the Furret. Furret gets completely destroyed. I guess the answer is just lose, because now there's a Shadow Annihilape on their Diggersby. I'm going to try for the counter down. I can't quite get it, so instead of letting them get a Scorching Sands, I'm just going to go for the Rage Fist. Rage Fist means that I'm going to exit boosted, and a boosted Annihilape is something that basically nothing in the game wants to deal with. Wigglytuff is their final Pokemon. Ice Punch is going to connect, dealing big damage, and I can just pivot out into Credilli. Credilli can now go for an incredibly aggressive acid farm down. Wigglytuff is barely able to hang on fractional HP, making it to the Icy Wind, but in comes the Furret just to immediately get debuffed by Rock Tomb. I was able to save the Annihilape as well. I still have the Dedenne. The Furret is forced to go for the charge attack priority tie as they're unable to get that farm down. Trailblaze is going to pick up the knockout, but one counter from the Annihilape will take the win. We move to the next match, and it's a very bad lead to Dedenne into Shadow Scizor. I would argue that Shadow Scizor is this team's biggest core breaker, as many of the ground types you can kind of play your way around with Shadow Annihilape boosting its way through things in the endgame, but Shadow Scizor, I think, is a very difficult lead to come back from, because Shadow Scizor completely dominates the Dedenne matchup and obviously completely shuts down Credilli. The game plan is as follows: force both shields, send in the Annihilape to get some counter damage, and then attempt to reverse sweep in the endgame with Credilli. The unfortunate thing is that every single Scizor team is ABA weak to the Annihilape, but obviously you can never get switch advantage against the Scizor lead to get the alignment that you're looking for. So instead, you're kind of just forced to bring in the Annihilape to get a little bit of damage. They send in Azumarill will go for the play rough, and now I'm going to need to sweep with Credilli. I need energy on Credilli if I'm going to win the game, so I'm actually not going to throw my move. I'm just going to go for a catch on Dedenne, because if I throw my move and knock them out, they can just bring in Scizor, and Scizor is going to delete the Credilli. My opponent did go for a nice undercharge there, and now they're going to make the game-winning play, which is they save that Azumarill, one off the move, and bring in their own Credilli. That's actually just a brilliant play by my opponent and means that I no longer have any ability to win this game, because I can just never get to enough moves on Credilli to win. It's really, really well played by my opponent. And as we see, they were ABA weak to the Annihilape, but unfortunately, my Annihilape could just never find the alignment that it was looking for. I'm able to pick up the knockout with the Rock Tomb on the charge attack priority tie, but they still have a Scizor, and they still have the Azumarill as well, so I'm just going to let myself get farmed down. Dedenne into Shadow Annihilape, back on track, a much better lead. And something that I noticed quite a bit with this team is I was able to win against some of the bad leads, but in a lot of circumstances, if Dedenne wins the lead, it's going to set you up for success, because Dedenne can not only win a lead, but it can win it so convincingly that it can get some serious damage on a second Pokemon as well. But in those tough lead matchups, when Dedenne is completely walled, things do get quite difficult. Here, the Shadow Annihilape has faith in their IVs, and it pays off. They're able to survive on 1 HP. In comes a Tinkaton, and Tinkaton is a pretty scary Pokemon for this backline to see. Obviously, Dedenne can beat it, but my backline is very, very weak. So how do we deal with the core breaker? We land the parabolic charge, we pivot into the Shadow Annihilape, my opponent is going to grab a shield, and now they're going to send in Air Slash Mandibuzz. I'm just looking for damage here. I don't care about the boost, so I go for the Ice Punch, and my opponent reads me like a book, and they're able to get that shield call right. They're forced to fire off energy though, so they are going to pick up the knockout with the Aerial Ace, but now it's time for Acid Credilli to shine. If this was Bullet Seed Credilli, I have no hope in this game because the Rock Tomb could not knock out from this health range. But with Acid, I just get to farm them into a range where I can knock them out with the Rock Tomb. This isn't quite Rock Tomb range yet, but it's going to leave them at basically no health remaining. They're barely able to hang on. In comes the Tinkaton, and this is going to be the tricky Pokemon to get rid of. I have to try and go for a catch here. So I'm going to farm up until right before my move. I switch, they wait the turn. It's a race of the fast moves, but I Thunder Shock them down. In comes Mandibuzz, and I do get the Parabolic Charge. I think that was damage registration error, but my Credilli was healthy enough that I wasn't getting knocked out by a foul play anyway, so either way, we were going to take that win. We see a familiar lead in the next match, Dedenne into Furret. Again, the Ryzen Furret, a really nice thing for this team, as this team just has nowhere for Furret to run. Furret is going to be hit with the Parabolic Charge. They can go for the Trailblaze, but the boost in attack just does not matter when I can boost up my defense faster than they can increase the damage on their Sucker Punches. So now I get to go for Parabolic Charge number 2, and this time I don't actually try and play the CMP tie, because last time I did that, they ended up catching a Parabolic Charge onto Diggersby. There are basically two kinds of teams that I've seen with Furret lead. The first one is obviously the ABA team with Diggersby and Wigglytuff in the back, and the other one is Gastrodon and a Flyer in the back. Judging by how hard they're selling out for swap, I think this might be the Gastrodon plus Flyer. Here, I actually want to save this move, so I will make a catch onto Credilli, because if it's Gastrodon plus Flyer, they have nothing for Credilli. They send in a Pidgeot, so it appears it is actually the Gastrodon plus Flyer team. Pidgeot can survive a Rock Tomb, but not super well. Pidgeot gonna have to go for the Brave Bird. Brave Bird, even at -1, is a very threatening move. Down goes Credilli, but then I can get the reverse KO with the counter from Shadow Annihilape. And I didn't have to take the Gust either, so now I have a full health Annihilape, I'm up a counter, and in comes Gastrodon. I'm farming up. Gastrodon is going to wait the turn and catch onto Furret, but realistically, this catch does not win my opponent the game because they're still 2 off the Earth Power. And now, they're in a range where I can just cleanly knock them out with the Play Rough that I stored from earlier. So even with the catch, it's just not enough to save them, as Dedenne, in a rare turn of events, gets revenge on a ground type and is able to take the win. We've got a mirror lead in the next match, and we've got a very difficult opponent as well. In this battle, I'm going up against Filbag, a trainer who recently became the 2nd ever trainer to have an undefeated win at a regional championship. He goes for the Parabolic Charge right away. I opt for the Play Rough, just looking to lock in some damage. I go for the Parabolic Charge. He overfarms, anticipating a potential switch out and a catch attempt. The Parabolic Charge is going to land, and now I have an interesting choice to make. I decide that I'm going to preserve my Dedenne. I'm expecting that it will have play in the back, so I will get a farm down. In comes Furret, and I make a critical error. I should not throw this energy. Furret is being used as a damage sponge. What I should have done is save the energy, because out comes Annihilape. Annihilape will take pretty significant damage from Grass Knot here, so I feel it's a pretty safe Rock Tomb bait, but look at Filbag. He calls the bait, and by throwing the energy on the Furret when I absolutely should not have, and by him now calling that Rock Tomb bait, I think I'm in an incredible amount of trouble. I have my Shadow Annihilape in the back, but he's not in a range where I can counter him down. I'm forced to bring in Dedenne. I don't think I'm surviving a Rage Fist here, so I'm forced to burn a shield, and I'm in a very difficult spot. I'm going to be firing off this Parabolic Charge. This is going to grab the shield from this Annihilape, and look at this overfarm that Filbag does. Filbag reads that it's the Annihilape, so he overfarms by 1. My Annihilape is a CMP winner, but I can't win CMP if he has an energy advantage. Just brilliant plays by Filbag. I completely misplayed that match, and we end up losing the game. Great lead in the next match. Dedenne into Blastoise. Opponent safe switches into Credilli, and I get to send out the Shadow Annihilape. We know this is such a dominant matchup for the Annihilape. Credilli goes for the Rock Tomb, and calling that bait just puts me in a really nice position. I'm going to overfarm and play to the CMP tie here because a Rage Fist, even at -1, should pick up the KO, and my opponent will actually end up committing the shield. So far, they are ABA weak to Annihilape, so I'm definitely going to commit the shield. This way, I get to exit with a ton of energy, and I'm just going to look to try and make Blastoise's life very uncomfortable. Blastoise is going to be hit with the Rage Fist, Annihilape ramping up its damage more and more and more. Annihilape going for another Rage Fist. That's going to land. Blastoise barely hanging on. In comes Shadow Scizor, and the opponent is just running triple weak to Annihilape. Shadow Scizor, again, is very awkward for this team once the Annihilape is gone, but I've already done enough damage to the Annihilape that I can just bring in Dedenne, and even though I'm down on energy, I'm not down enough to where I'm going to lose this. I will get to outpace the Scizor, pick up the knockout with the Parabolic Charge, and with the Scizor gone, there's just no ability for my opponent now to beat the Credilli. So Blastoise will get to knock me out with the Hydro Cannon, but I get to send in Credilli, and Credilli will get to go for the Acid Farm down, and it's another team triple weak to Shadow Annihilape. Terrible lead in the next match, Dedenne into Diggersby. I throw one Thundershock and then switch out into the Credilli. This was just a play pattern that I was trying because either way I'm going to get outpaced. They go for the Scorching Sands, and now in comes Lapras, another team that's AVA to Annihilape, by the way. And this is actually a matchup that I can just flip as the Credilli. So I'm very okay playing this out. They gave me a very healthy energy head start. I will commit the shield as they go for the Sparkling Aria and just look to fire off another Rock Tomb. Each Rock Tomb I throw is going to reduce Lapras's attack more and more and more. This Lapras, oh my goodness, I'm able to get to a third Rock Tomb. They're forced a double shield, and I have a bit of a choice ahead of me. This actually ends up being a charge attack priority tie. I just decided to let this go. They go for the Sparkling Aria, and oh my goodness, can they not farm down here? It looks like they cannot. I'm worried about me being on 1 HP, so I decide to let this go, and I will not play for switch advantage. Instead, I get some farm on Dedenne, and now I'm going to get to send in Shadow Annihilape, but in the back, they have their own Dedenne, and I'm going to lose this game. It turns out I had to risk it. I had to shield there, hope I wasn't at 1 HP, and that I could actually make the Rock Tomb, because without switch advantage, I have no way to win. Dedenne, unfortunately for me, just does too much damage, and it can outpace the Annihilape as well. I bring in my own Dedenne, but man, if I had made the play for switch, I would have actually been in a position to win. But I was worried about getting KO'd to the shield, so I didn't, and unfortunately that ends up costing me here, as I have all the energy in the world on Dedenne, but Diggersby just does not care. Dedenne, so dominant in some matchups, but unfortunately in that one, can't really do anything. Hopping into the final match. This match, I actually didn't have Annihilape on the team. This was an earlier draft that had Lapras, but I felt it was too funny of a battle not to put somewhere, so I figured it worked well at the end of this video. And here, we end up leading Dedenne into Lapras. They safe switch a Talonflame, and they are clearly just operating on the principle that Dedenne does not exist, but unfortunately, Dedenne does in fact exist. It's here, and it's a big problem for them. If they bring back in the Lapras, they should throw 1 turn before I make it to my Parabolic Charge. So I'm going to farm up 3, wait the turn, and catch a Sparkling Aria onto our own Lapras. So we catch the Aria onto our Lapras, and my opponent immediately resigned the match after that filthy catch. All in all, I really like Shadow Annihilape in this current meta. Shadow Annihilape, it's always been a dominant sweeper since its community day, and people just were blatantly disrespecting it. To me, Furret lead and Diggersby in the back is just absolutely crazy. It's not like Furret really has any counterplay into the Annihilape. Annihilape can just shield once and counter the Furret all the way down and exit with close to 100 energy. So people are really choosing to disrespect it, at least they were in my ELO range. And man, it really felt like game after game, Annihilape was basically just sweeping teams. I did have one great game where I believe it was a Fury Cutter Golisopod with Credilli and Diggersby in the back. They save switched the Credilli. I got to bring in the Annihilape. I farmed them all the way down. I was able to just straight up beat the Golisopod and then just fully 1v3. Unfortunately, I realized I wasn't recording after that sweep, but even in these games, it really felt like Annihilape swept several times. It just puts so much pressure onto teams, and if teams are not building with Annihilape in mind, then Annihilape can absolutely make them pay. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.